Every time, man. Every time I gotta go somewhere where I got a 3-hour drive home, it pours rain, severe storms, thunder, lightning, slow traffic. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new to the channel, thank you very much for stopping in. Hit the subscribe button right now if you want to. Alright, it's a day later. I just couldn't continue filming. Too much rain, too much traffic. Just couldn't do it. Anyway, what I wanted to talk about today, and if you've been following along, you know that we recently took a trip to the mountains with Highlands Motoring Festival. It really pushed the car a little bit on some of the twisty roads and different conditions, including heavy rain. And it was a very, very informative trip. Informative in that I left that trip with a much better understanding of the car's strengths and weaknesses, we'll say. So if you've been following along since the very beginning, you'll know that we took a trip to the mountains on similar roads and similar terrain when I first got this car back in, I don't remember. I think we got the car in July. We drove to the mountains in November. At that time, we just had a muffler delete. We were still running on the stock run flat tires and 17-inch wheels. We hadn't been lowered, none of that stuff. I'm going to save you the time. I'm not going to list all the current modifications. You can go back and take a look at a recent video I did. I believe I called it car check or something like that. Anyway, we're in a great position to do a nice comparison from that stock setup all the way to how we're situated now. So I'm going to start with some of the strengths, some of the positives that came out of the trip, and as far as how the car is set up right now and what I really liked about it, and then we'll get into some of the car's weaknesses, some of the weak points, and what I want to address moving forward, especially considering that I would like to get into autocross next season and hopefully be set up right away at the beginning of the season. So the first thing that was very, very noticeable and very enjoyable was the new exhaust note. No rasp, very minimal drone. The car sounded fantastic, especially as it echoed off the sides of the canyon walls, the mountain walls in the Appalachians or Blue Ridge Mountains, wherever the hell we were. Got a number of compliments throughout the trip, including from Ferrari and Porsche guys, so that tells you something. Another element that I was very pleased with and actually surprised about was these Lexani LX20 tires, 275 35 19s in the back, 255 40 19s up front. Really handled well, even in the wet conditions, which surprised me because I read some relatively negative reviews just saying because they are kind of high performance summer tires, expectations were relatively low going into some of this heavy rain that we experienced in the mountains, but really no issues. You can get a set of these tires similar sizes online for right at about $400, so it's kind of hard to beat. You'll see in the video taking the car through the mountains that I turned traction control off because as the car would feel the tires start to slip, it would cut power, which made it not very fun. So taking that off, I was expecting the tires to really break loose around some of the corners, but I really had no issues. If you drove appropriately, you really could maintain traction very, very well, so very pleased with the tires. They held up really well too. If you watch that video back on the stock setup, those run flat tires after one trip to the mountains had some severe damage, especially towards the edge of the tires. Not only feathering, there was actually chunks of rubber peeling off. No issue with these tires at all. They look almost in brand new condition. Again, we put about 175, 180 miles and pretty aggressive driving, and they held up very, very well, both fronts and backs. I discovered that paddle shifters are a must. It was just so much more convenient, downshifting especially, not having to take your hands off the wheel to shift the old stick. I do wish they were a little bit longer because as you turn your you know, the paddles are stationary on the column. As you turn the wheel, your fingers obviously come out of contact with the paddle. So having a little bit longer ones, which are available, would be beneficial. Suspension was awesome. Definitely a huge difference, although it's just lowering springs. I went with the Tein lowering springs, the S-Tech. Substantial difference over stock in taking some of these corners more aggressive. So brain's fried today. Anyway, you can take the corners much more aggressive. The lower center of gravity really helped to get rid of some of that body roll, combined with nice wide tires. The car really felt planted and very controllable in the mountains. Made it for a really enjoyable experience. That's really actually super exciting considering that I want to go to coilovers this fall or this winter, and just knowing how well these springs performed, I can only imagine how good this car is going to handle with adjustable coilovers. And what about the tune? How well does the car perform now after we've been tuned? Well, very, very well. There is truly a huge difference. All those people that say it's not worth tuning the 3.7, nonsense. Throttle response has been improved dramatically, and it's very, very noticeable in a situation where you're getting out of and getting back into the throttle, coming out of corners. Having it be much more snappy is huge. The increased torque, especially at low end, again, coming into corners aggressively, getting on the brakes, and then getting back on the throttle, you can definitely feel the improvement in that low end torque, getting you back up to speed. And the additional power up top is very noticeable as well. As you get into that 6,500 RPM range, you can still feel it pulling strong, and that is just awesome. Another part that I was really surprised about actually was the brake performance. Stock brakes, except for the upgraded pads, which you saw I installed recently, definitely made a difference over stock. The brakes felt much grippier and more responsive, and brake dust was very minimal as advertised by the Power Stop Evolution, I believe, brake pads. But discussing brakes is going to get me into the negatives now, so let's move on to the next section. Although stopping power was improved with these new brake pads, the weak point I noticed was in the stock brake rotors. This is something commonly known about these cars, and I'll tell you what I experienced. So we did push the car quite hard, about 150 miles the day before and 175 miles during the trip. So they did heat up significantly, and I didn't notice anything in the mountains, but I did notice some differences on the way home. Slowing down quickly from highway speeds, I noticed a bit of a shimmy. Some might call it rotor warp, but what I really think it was is uneven heating of the rotors, causing it to do something like this as the pads were squeezing down on the rotors, and it leads to a little bit of vibration that you can feel in the steering wheel. Fortunately, it went away as the brakes cooled down, or the next day when I started driving the car, I didn't notice that anymore. It's getting hot in here. But it's definitely present. So I don't even know that it's necessary to upgrade to the big brake kit, but definitely in a situation like this, I would want to upgrade to some at least slotted rotors. I'm not sure I'm a big fan of the drilled and slotted. I might just go slotted rotors, but upgraded nonetheless would be a good improvement. Although handling overall was greatly improved with the lowering springs, I can only imagine how good it's going to get with sway bars installed, so that is priority right now. I can't say that I can feel the Megan Racing strut tower brace. It's not noticeable, but I think the sway bars are going to make a big difference, and I want to pursue some other chassis stiffening components. They make some braces available online, and we may just invest in a couple of those, or some pieces of those, and get the chassis a bit more stiff. Some of those high-speed corners that you take in an autocross situation are really going to put some strain on the chassis, so stiffening it up a little bit more is only going to help. Really, the only other complaint, and it's not really even a complaint that I have, are these seats, the non-sport seats. The bolstering in them is okay, but it definitely can be better. We didn't feel like we were sliding around in the seats, but I can only imagine going into, again, an autocross event where you're really taking some high-speed, tight corners, having that extra bolstering to hold you in would be beneficial. Now, I'm exploring a couple of different options. One might consider just upgrading to sport seats, at least in the front. Those are quite expensive. What I'm thinking about doing is getting some seats from a G37, which are a little bit more affordable. They're still the nice black leather, but I'm not sure how the electronics will line up, and I don't think anyone's done it. The other thing we might run into is width of the seat, and I'm not sure that it would fit with this, the side, the B-pillar here. Get my hands on a cheap enough one, I'll just try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If it does, we got a cheap new front seat with a little extra bolstering and security. Another thing on the near future agenda is a retune. We've already called and got a price quote and everything like that, but because we changed the exhaust, although it wasn't a significant change, we did increase the diameter of the pipe to 2.5 inch, and we have that mid muffler, even though it's all wide open still like it was before. There's going to be some variation in flow, so pursuing a retune is just smart, and we're going to change the filters as well. So My concern with that is that although we may pick up a couple extra horsepower with the increased diameter. If you've watched some of my exhaust theory videos, I've talked about this before. We've increased the diameter of the pipe, so we should experience a bit more power, maybe just 1 or 2 more horsepower. It is summertime, so we don't know, but I might have a slight decrease in torque, which I am concerned about. Generally, the 2.5 diameter pipe does not produce as much torque as the 2 1/4 inch pipe, which I had before. I'm at 284 foot-pounds of torque currently. I would estimate with a retune that we'd probably lose a couple foot-pounds. I would imagine I'll be around 280-ish, which isn't bad, but time will tell. We'll see. That's really all I wanted to go over. A lot of surprising stuff with how the car performed. I was very, very pleased overall. A couple of things that we need to address, which I've talked about before, but now they're more clear than ever. If you have any questions about the current setup, please leave them in the comments section below. Give me a thumbs up. I want to get as many comments and as many thumbs up as possible. If you're watching it, just hit it right now. We're continuing to grow the channel every single day, and I really, really appreciate the support of everyone. I truly can't thank you enough. So thank you very much for watching again. Stick around, a lot of good things coming up this summer. That's it. See you in the next video.